Hello everyone, and welcome to Daddy Needs Coffee. My name is Lee Stephen, science fiction author, and daddy who always needs coffee. Welcome to the channel. So you can tell by this point that something's a little bit different with this video. It's actually a first for the channel, and a source of much chagrin from the production side of things. In short, I had one of my marathon nightly playthroughs, only to discover afterward that virtually all, of the audio glitched out. What could be heard was distorted and covered with static, or the actual voice work was so low compared to the game's audio, it could barely be discerned at all. I can't imagine why this has happened. And when I first discovered it, I'll be honest, I was pretty upset. One doesn't go through a whole night of battling extraterrestrial forces for the good of the world and recording it for your viewing pleasure, only to find out that it didn't quite go that way. However, there's a silver lining in the midst of all of this, and it's one that has me a little bit excited to record this video. So as you can see on the actual video itself, I'm going through the motions and showing you all of the things that I have done between the last playthrough and this one. I'll make it much shorter and explain to you simply that I defeated a bunch of legacy missions on single player, added various customizations to all the characters, including some unique weapons that I unlocked, such as a sword that you'll soon see on the back of Esther Brooking, as well as several other shotguns and assault rifles, some custom armor, and some new and unique personalities. Featured among these personalities is an angry Scott Remington, a cocky Esther, who you can see now, and a smug Varvara, who is yet to appear in this series to any degree of significance. I also added several different sites, or rooms rather, to the Avenger, namely upgrades to the rooms that were there, such as a hyperbolic chamber, and I actually don't believe it's called a hyperbolic chamber, but it's essentially a chamber upgrade to the medical bay that allows you to send tired soldiers onto a mission. And as you'll see, that was a fortuitous addition for this particular episode. I also increased power and did a little bit of other maintenance with the increased supply that I had. So I could spend this entire video just explaining what you're watching on the screen, going through all of these characters such as Vanya the cleaner, who you're seeing now, and showing off his sniper rifle and basically telling you what you're seeing. But there's another opportunity here, and I want to take advantage of it. You see, throughout this series, I have desired to share my writing experiences with you all, to explain what goes into the writing process, not only on the fly, as with this game and these characters, but in my series, Epic. Unfortunately, it's hard to do that when your adrenaline is pumping because you've got Advent troopers raining hell down on you, and your troopers are getting shot left and right. Oftentimes, I'll enter a mission saying, I'm going to talk about this, only to be followed shortly after by, oh, wait a minute, let me get this shot off first. And it snowballs from there. So if nothing else, this will afford me an opportunity to do just what I sought out to do, to talk about what we're seeing. Not the actions, but the motivations. To discuss Svetlana Voronova in full detail, and Scott, and Esther, and David, because they're all going to be on the mission you're about to see. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee for yourself, and let's enjoy a unique and unprecedented channel experience. Now, full disclosure before I begin. Because my microphone setup is not functioning quite like I want it to, I can't trust it to record audio at present until I do a little bit more troubleshooting, which I just have not had time to do yet. Because of that, I'm recording this audio through my simple laptop microphone. The quality's not the best, but I do have a couple tricks up my sleeve to clear things up and at least make it a little more presentable. I'll also caution you about this. I'm going to do this just like I do my playthroughs. There's not a lot of this that's going to be scripted outside of a few things that I know I want to talk about. But for the most part, this is going to be a stream of consciousness presentation. As I see things that are happening that are interesting from a character standpoint, I will touch on them, this time without the distraction of having to stop, aim, duck, and shoot. But be forewarned, there may be a few flubs along the way. I just don't have the time to fix them all. I also find it a little bit humorous that this is the longest video by far out of all the ones that I've done. Naturally, I couldn't have a microphone glitch on a 30-minute lost mop-up, but rather a 2-hour epic adventure. But that's what we've got in store, so buckle up and hold on. Several weeks ago, a fan of the channel, the Rondor 1 Eagle, posed the following question. At some point, could you discuss the balance between planning and discovery? How much of a story do you sketch out when starting a novel? And how much do plot and characters change during the writing process? It's an excellent question with a huge answer tree. I'll try to touch on some of that now. I've often described plotting a story as standing at the edge of a forest and looking beyond the forest and seeing a lighthouse. You know you need to get to that lighthouse, but you don't quite know how the path through the forest is going to weave. Maybe you'll take a hard left. Maybe you'll run through some mud. Maybe you'll find a maze of roads and you've got to backtrack and sort your way through it all. But at the end, you know you're going to get to that lighthouse. I wish I could take credit for this example, and though I use it often when describing the process of plotting, it's not my own. For that I have to credit my author mentor, Barbara Colley, or at least she's the one who introduced me to this quote that I've never forgotten. On a conceptual level, I can't think of anything to better describe the process of plotting. I can say this honestly. Never once in my writing career have I completely stuck to an initial outline. Something has always changed. There's some element that has not worked out as well as I've wanted. There are some elements that I stumble upon, some new adventures or characters that I feel the need to explore. And all of these things have veered me off that path. I'll continue in a bit, but I do want you to enjoy at least the visuals of this cutscene. It's a shame you can't hear it, and I actually remarked during the recording of this that this was one of the best cutscenes that I had seen in the entire game thus far. The voice acting was great. It was fantastic. Very cinematic, which is a thing that I love. And though you can't hear it, I'll summarize it for you here. Our Avenger has come under attack by one of the Chosen, by the Warlock. After taking a couple of hits, the Avenger is forced to land, and we are forced to defend it. Hence all the scrambling around, messages blaring over the loudspeaker, and general feeling of panic, both in the game and in my voice, which unfortunately you can hear none of. But I would suggest that you go on YouTube and look up some of the attacks on the Avenger. I'm sure there are many videos uploaded that can give you a full appreciation for this cinematic and how it sounds. And I apologize again that you were not able to experience it here. One more thing I'll explain about this mission before I continue talking about writing. Because this is a win or lose mission, as in if the Avenger falls, the game is over, you're allowed to take 2 squads. So instead of 5 soldiers, I actually had 10 on this operation. So what you'll see next is me deciding who I'm going to take. And as has been the trend, it's the 14th that gets much of the attention here. So at least you have a little bit of context now for what's taking place on the screen as you listen to me continue to talk about plotting and discovery. Some of the best plot changes that I have ever come up with that have deviated from my initial outlines have been spur of the moment. I can think of several right off the top of my head, including a character who I had originally killed off at the end of Dawn of Destiny. Now, I won't name this character for the sake of those who have not read the series, even though the character did survive, just because I don't want anyone new to the series to know that they survived. You should go into all the books completely unaware of who makes it and who doesn't, because as you know, if you're a fan, anyone can go at any time. But suffice to say, when it came time to literally and figuratively pull the trigger on this character's death, I couldn't do it. For some reason, it just didn't feel like the right thing to do. And I'm glad that I listened to my gut instinct, because he ended up being one of the more beloved characters in this series. There are actually several characters that I have tried to kill off over the course of the books that have been written, but the time was never there. It wasn't the right death, or it wasn't the right mission, or something just said no, not yet, if at all. I never make a guarantee as to the survival or death of any character. So just because someone narrowly dodged death in one book doesn't mean that death is coming for them in the next. But for these characters, keeping them alive gave the series a dimension that it never would have had. These are, as I said, beloved characters, especially this one who dodged death at the end of Dawn of Destiny. It would not be the epic series without them. I can also think of characters who have developed due to spur of the moment changes. There is no character that better personifies this than Esther Brooking. Now, it should be no secret to those who have ever heard me talk about this series before that Esther may just be my favorite character in the entire series. She is the one with whom I argue the most. There have been so many times when I have wanted Esther to go a certain direction, and she has flat out said no. And it's kind of an interesting dichotomy between writer and character when the character defies the will of the writer and does their own thing. But I let Esther get away with it because she always gives me something better than what I originally had in mind. In order to fully understand Esther's conception and development, we have to step back to the early 2000s. Now, though Dawn of Destiny was released in late 2006, I had been writing this book for 6 years, since halfway through my time in college. Now, when Dawn of Destiny came out, I was extremely proud of it. Many people say it's on their bucket list to write a novel one day, but very few people actually do it. And many who do aren't quite willing to put forth the effort required to truly make it something special. Writing a novel is easy. Writing a good novel is exceedingly difficult. When Dawn of Destiny won Best New Fiction and Audiobook of the Year from New Apple Literary in 2014, I was ecstatic. It felt like validation for all of the hard work that I had done and all of the time that I had dedicated to getting Dawn of Destiny right, even if the award came almost a decade after the book had been released. Just the same, looking back on it now, I probably consider Dawn of Destiny my least favorite of the series. The truth is, in many ways, I was still discovering who I was as a writer. And though I think the book came out very, very well, if I were writing it over again, there are certainly some things that I would have done differently. Now, if you're wondering what this all has to do with plotting and discovery and the evolution of a character with Esther as the example, just trust me, we're on our way there. One of my big regrets when writing Dawn of Destiny was the lack of strong female characters in the novel. Now, this was not intentional and actually was a stylistic choice that just didn't turn out the way that I had envisioned. At about the time that I was coming up with many of the core ideas and concepts for Dawn of Destiny, a movie had been released called Pearl Harbor. Now, if you haven't seen it, truth be told, you're not missing a whole lot, but for what it is, which is a fictional take on a historical event, it's not terrible. It's just not a movie you're going to remember much about 5 years down the road. Just the same, this movie came out, I watched it, and I thought it was okay. But what it really did was get me in a World War II mindset. And those of you who know the series know that I have sprinkled in elements of World War II throughout the series. One of those elements was the response of women in World War II. Over 35,000 women enlisted in the Army at the onset of World War II. And many of the roles they filled were as nurses. And so with this in mind, I had the idea to duplicate that in Epic and have a rush into the military of women, joining up the effort to protect Earth from hostile invaders. Now, in my head, I thought this was a good idea. But the unintended consequence of this was that I had a lot of female medics and not much else. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that idea doesn't sound all that great to begin with, all I can say is, hey, I was 19. Just the same, when Dawn of Destiny was finished and published, and once it was too late to turn back and change all the things that I had written, I realized that there was a gaping hole in female heroines of the series. I didn't feel good about that, and I set myself to change it in the books to come, so that this would just be a momentary anomaly in the series and not the way that the series would ultimately go. With that in mind, I decided as I prepared for Outlaw Trigger that I was going to insert a female soldier who would have a somewhat impactful role in the 14th of Novosibirsk. She was going to be a Caucasian soldier from small-town USA who winds up in Russia at Novosibirsk and ends up being an effective part of the team. Her name was Lisa Tiffin. Lisa wasn't necessarily going to have a starring role in the series, but more something along the lines of Boris or Auric or Igor. She would be there she would serve her purpose, but she wasn't going to be a torchbearer, at least not yet. And with that in mind, I began to plot out the events of Epic 2 Outlaw Trigger. The year is now 2007, and I cannot find a job. Not to save my life. The economy was not kind to new graduates, and my degree in communication arts was proving to be as beneficial as a boil on the toe. It wasn't helping me at all. And so I began to do odd jobs here and there. I would be an extra or a stand-in in a movie. I dabbled in real estate. At some point, I was even a substitute teacher. And it was during that particular time in my life, when I was substitute teaching, that Lisa Tiffin transformed from background character to one of the most iconic characters in the entire series. So I substitute taught high school kids because I was closest in age to them and I felt like I could relate to them. And I felt like, honestly, they would be the least trouble for someone in their early to mid-20s to deal with. Substitute teaching is not exactly fun. It certainly has its moments of laughter and humor, but by and large, you're just a babysitter. And so many times I would find myself welcoming the class in, all of whom were thrilled to find out that there was a sub, and many of whom were excited to find out that it was me because they had me before and they knew I was a pretty laid-back guy. But I would essentially hand out papers and say, this is what the teacher wants you to do. Just be quiet. Don't make me get anyone in trouble. And that was it. I can't think of one single time that I actually taught something. Rather, I'd spend a lot of time just sitting at my desk, watching students do their busy work. During one of these days in particular, when I was just observing the students as they did their work, I happened to lock eyes briefly for a moment with a young black woman who was not interested whatsoever in doing the worksheet that I had handed out to the class. Quite the contrary, the look she gave me was one of utter disgust and disdain. She didn't want to be there. She was better than that class, and she didn't mind letting me know it with her eyes. Now, as a teacher, this is not the kind of moment that impacts you. It's probably the kind of moment that makes you consider other career alternatives. But as a writer, something struck in that moment. And I looked at this girl and the disdain and the disgust in her eyes, and I had a brain strike. Now, there's no secret that for a writer, you're never really off the clock. I think about writing day and night while driving, while showering, while eating, while doing just about anything, even if only indirectly. As it turned out, at the same time that I had this moment in the classroom, my brain was 100% invested on the writing and development of Outlaw Trigger. In fact, much of it had already been written with Lisa Tiffin as a character. It's hard to describe those moments when you just know something needs to change. When you just know that an idea is good. You can't quite define it with terms. It doesn't always happen when you're sitting at your desk, working on your manuscript. Sometimes it happens when you lock eyes briefly for the fleetingest of moments with a total stranger. But I knew when I saw the look on that girl's face, that's the kind of character I need to capture. I needed a character with attitude in her eyes. I needed a character who thought she was better than all the characters around her. Maybe even a character who thought she was better than me, the writer. You see, Lisa Tiffin was a safe choice, but I needed someone a little more dangerous. So she wasn't going to be a soldier. She was going to be a scout, a tactical operative who specializes in going behind enemy lines and spying, for a lack of a better way to put it. She was also going to be British, because no one can pull off smug like the British. Because the girl that I looked at in that classroom happened to be black, I went ahead and changed Lisa Tiffin from a Caucasian girl from small town USA to a black girl from Cambridge, England. And in the span of one moment, Lisa Tiffin completely transformed. The only thing missing was a new name. She was not Lisa Tiffin anymore. She was someone completely different. I can't tell you why I decided to go with Esther as a new name. I had no particular feelings about the name one way or the other. It wasn't a reference to the biblical book of Esther in any way, shape, or form. It just felt right. Brooking is a British surname, and so Esther Brooking came into being. And Lisa Tiffin was as good as dead. And so I began to replace Lisa Tiffin in the manuscript with Esther Brooking. Now, I'll be very careful here not to go into too much spoiler territory, but I will say that the spoilers you'll hear really won't affect your reading experience if you've never read Epic before. With that in mind, however, you can probably consider some of this a minor spoiler warning, though it really won't impact much whatsoever. There was a moment in Book 2, toward the beginning of the novel, where the 14th is, for lack of a better way to put it, hanging out by the pool. Esther was associating with Beacon, because Beacon is the kind of character who's just going to gravitate toward newcomers and make them feel welcome and probably a little uncomfortable at the same time. And as Beacon and Esther are talking, all of a sudden, Esther starts to look across the pool at Scott Remington. Now, you may be wondering about the phrase, all of a sudden, as if this could somehow capture me, the author, by surprise. But it did. All of a sudden, I'm writing this, and Esther starts to look at Scott and starts to hint that she's looking with purpose. I hadn't planned it, but it was immediately the right writing decision to make, not because I wanted to do it, but because Esther was doing it on her own. It was in this moment that I realized, girl, you've got eyes for Scott Remington, don't you? Trust me, that was a surprise. But the flavor that it added to her character was undeniable. All of a sudden, this new special ops scout with an attitude has joined the 14th and has her eyes set on one of her commanding officers. I mean, come on. That's the kind of stuff that good drama is made of. And so here she is, having eyes for Scott. Think about that for a moment if you have read any of the books in the Epic series beyond Book 2. What would Epic be if Esther did not have eyes for Scott Remington? How much would be missing from this story if she was just another stock background character. There'd be so much flavor missing from this universe. She makes all the difference in the world to this series. Now, one thing I always talk about when I discuss characters is that they truly do have minds of their own. At some point or another, while writing every single character, they've done something that I haven't expected. I can only attribute this to the idea of writing a character as if I was that character. If I'm writing a scene with Boris, I'm writing it as if I am Boris, and I'm just writing what happens. My mind thinks the way that Boris thinks. So when I'm writing naturally because it's me. This same thing applies to every character from Boris to Scott to Svetlana and most certainly to Esther. I bring this up because no character has defied my will more than Esther Brooking. It wasn't my idea to have her slam a bowl of porridge into Svetlana's face. She did that on her own. Who was I to say no? The girl knows what she wants, and usually she gets it. Not always quite in the way she thinks, but that's another story. Needless to say, imagine the epic series with Lisa Tiffin arriving in Book 2. It's not the same. No Esther is no drama, it's no attitude, it's no humor, it's no petty rivalry with Svetlana. There's so much missing from this story if Esther isn't there. So think about that for a moment as you think about plotting, as you think about charting the directions that you go, determining where you're going to take a story. Imagine the vast contrast between a character like Lisa, who has appeared in the series since, but in a much more interesting and meaningful way, and a character like Esther. You take your plan, you crumple it up, and you throw it in the garbage. It's all you can do. And just like that, your route to the lighthouse on the other side of the forest has changed. But you're still going to that lighthouse. I love Esther as a character because she forces me to make those course corrections. Listen, this series is exciting for me when I don't know what's coming. I never know what's coming with her. But it keeps me honest. It keeps me open to changing things if the change is for the better. Now, I've talked a lot about Esther because she personifies this concept of course correction and changing your plot based on the discoveries that you've made. But trust me, I can have this same conversation in some way, shape, or form about every single character in the series. And so with that in mind, I would say, be true to the characters you write. If it affects your plotting, if it affects your discovery, it's probably for a good reason. It will probably yield good fruit. Listen to your gut. It will rarely lead you astray. Let's return for a moment to the action taking place here on the battlefield. As you can see, we are neck deep in chrysalids and advent troopers and specters and all of these baddies that are coming to prevent us from destroying these two tanks, for lack of a better way to explain them. And we've done quite well thus far. We have a bunch of disoriented troops. They're in full retreat, as you can see now, and we have control of the situation. As a human being, you always strive for control. It's just in our nature to want to be in control of as many situations as possible. Now, keep in mind that control doesn't mean being the boss. It doesn't mean being in control of everyone else, but rather being in control of you and your choices and the actions that you take. In life, this is a good thing. It leads to accountability and personal responsibility and healthy senses of duty and obligation and being a part of a functioning workforce and community. But as an author, control can be very dangerous. Control can lead to stagnation. When you're in control of your story, when you're in control of all of the characters and all of the plot lines, then there's very little to catch you off guard. There's very little to truly get you excited and wondering, as your fans should be wondering, what happens next. Well, you know what happens next because you're in control. Few things are more thrilling than writing a scene or a character or even a moment and genuinely not knowing where it's about to lead you. It's a feeling of adrenaline. It's a feeling of fear. It's a feeling that I can only imagine fans must feel when they read a manuscript, when they read a book that they love and want to know what's going to happen at the end of this scene or at the end of this book or with this character or with their relationship. I have found that some of my best scenes are scenes in which I was not in control of anything. And I was letting the story be organic and fresh and unexpected. And when I was writing with the excitement of a fan reading, that's a hard feeling to duplicate any other way. And so for that reason, because the writing becomes so much better in those moments when you're not in complete control, I like to say strive for 80% control, majority control, but rarely, if not never, total control. Total control gets boring. It gets predictable. And if you're feeling bored and predictable as the writer, how are your fans going to feel? With that in mind, let's talk about Svetlana Voronova. From the onset of Epic, Svetlana establishes herself as a character who wishes to be taken seriously, who wishes to maintain that measure of control, not only of the things around her, but of herself. Control of her emotions, control of the way she presents herself, control of her image, which is that of someone who seeks to be taken seriously. That's part of the reason why her rivalry with Esther is as fun and dynamic as it is. Esther represents pure chaos. Svetlana, much as her attitude in this XCOM 2 game, is very much by the book. We're going to have a meeting. We're going to send out memos. We're going to take a roll call. That's just how Svetlana rolls. I can safely say that there is no other character in the series who evolves on a grand a scale as Svetlana. If one were to look at the cover for Epic 6, The Devil You Don't, they would scarcely believe that Svetlana is the cover girl for that book. That's her? Really? How did that happen? It happened because of her battle as a character with the nature of control. As a character who wants to be taken seriously, who wants to be looked at as the responsible one, as the adult in the room, the thought of being seen as a joke or a punchline is just a brutal thing for a character like Svetlana. And that's precisely why I think one of her breakthrough moments is in book 4. And I won't spoil it for those who have not read the book, but when she shows up at Scott's door with a certain something and basically says, "All right, let's do it." That's a huge moment as a character for her. First and foremost, it is an acceptance of the fact that she cannot control her image, which is of the utmost importance to her. She doesn't want to be a joke. She doesn't want to be seen as a silly person, or as a clown, or as someone who can be laughed off or just generally not taken seriously. Svetlana wants to be taken seriously all of the time. And so when you think of that particular breakthrough scene for her, and when you think of how much personal courage it had to take for her to do what she did, and to go out on that limb that she really does not want to go out on, it puts in perspective how she must have felt when it was over, and when things went ultimately the way that they did in that moment. And it can put into context why in the aftermath she sort of hunkered down on that element of control, because she realized sometimes relinquishing control of your image to what everyone else thinks it needs to be doesn't quite work, at least not the way that you intended. I've remarked in past episodes how I feel women are being incorrectly portrayed as characters of strength today. Today, a strong character in a movie is one that can punch a guy through 10 walls and can get shot and has no ill effect, and is a superhero and who never faces an obstacle that she's not better than. And the poster girl for this would be Rey from the Star Wars sequels. But I've always felt that the best way to show character strength, be they man or woman, is to force them to come to grips with their own weakness. No character has done that more than Svetlana in this series. Sveta is constantly coming face to face with her own imperfections, her own shortcomings. She is often reminded of them not only by the situations she finds herself in, but sometimes by her comrades, in particular characters like Esther, who pick on her, for lack of a better way to put it. But in facing those weaknesses, in coming to grips with them, she has transformed in a way that no character has in the Epic series. I would wager that anyone who had only read Dawn of Destiny, if they looked at the cover for Epic 6, The Devil You Don't, they would never identify that cover girl as Svetlana. I think they would be like, what? That's who? I just don't think they would ever see that coming because of the kind of character that she begins as, which is a character that, though she takes herself seriously, isn't quite ready to compete in all ways like those around her. And she's reminded of it often. One character trait of Svetlana that I've tried to get across, and I don't think it's always had the opportunity to stand out, but she's kind of a klutz. Even though she is great at her job, and even though she is a character who wants to be taken seriously, and even though now in Epic 6, which is currently where she is in her character journey, even now, even with this kind of remade Svetlana, she still has her klutzy little moments that only serve to remind her of the shortcomings and weaknesses that she has. So don't mistake a character having weaknesses for a character being weak. And I think that's what many people do today. They see a character who can't win a fight and they think, well, why isn't this a strong character? And that's especially prevalent for female characters today, because the trend, it's the popular thing right now is to make female characters the best at everything that they do. That's not a strong character. A strong character knows where they fall short, and they figure out a way to compensate for it. It was an interesting moment in Book 5 for Svetlana, where she realizes that awareness of her weaknesses have led to her strength, have led to her new power. If not for her weaknesses and her shortcomings, she would never become the character that she really starts to become in Book 5. Now, there are reasons that she becomes that kind of a character, and I won't get into those because that would definitely spoil things. But if not for her fear, if not for her insecurity, if not for her desperate pride, she would never be in the situation that she's in, where she had to do what she did. Of all the characters in Epic, I'm most proud of Svetlana for her journey. And she still has her struggles. She still has her insecurities. And she even goes so far as to hide those insecurities behind, I hesitate to say pride, but maybe that's the word I should use. But she tries her best, even in the situation that she's in Book 6, to be taken seriously by all those around her. So some things don't change, but the overall evolution and the overall story arc of her coming to grips with who she is, finding ways to overcome herself in many ways, I just think is an inspiring story, and I love it. I love where she's come from, and I love what she's become, and I love where she's going to go throughout the remainder of this series. She is not the girl who was there in Dawn of Destiny, with the occasional moment of quivering lips, so to speak. That it was described. She was described as a character with quivering lips once by a reviewer, and I've never forgotten that little reference. I don't think it was an accurate reference, but she definitely had her moments of just sad weakness in book one, and she's overcome that well in the books that have followed. And so when you think of a strong character, think of the two that we've talked about. Think of Esther and think of Svetlana, but don't think of them as you may have come to know them throughout the course of the series. Think of how they began. Think of how Esther began in Katanga. Think of that experience. Think of what she had to overcome. Think of Svetlana at that Bakhma outpost, when she did what she did and when she lost what she lost, and then what she did afterward. Think of that when you think of who these characters are now, because those moments of weakness, those moments of not being good enough, made them who they are. And so that would be my message to anyone listening to this who wants to write a strong character. Don't confuse strength as a character with invincibility. It is not that whatsoever. Give your characters weaknesses to overcome. The strongest characters are the ones who can honestly sometimes get around themselves or get out of their own way, if that's what they need to do. They're the ones who learn how to win in spite of themselves. So take that little bit of advice when writing characters. And if someone says, why are all your characters weak? Well, they're not weak. They need ways to show how strong they are. There are no miracles if not for shortcomings, right? The same concept applies to characters as they're being written. So up until this point, things have gone quite well for the 14th in this mission. I don't think anyone's taken real significant damage. The sniper Vanya is a little bit dinged up, but other than that, everybody's in great shape, and we've been slowly but surely matriculating our way down the field of enemies and taking out one patrol group at a time. That was a pretty intense fight on the other side of the battlefield. We had a whole lot of enemies that we had to plow through, but we did it. And now we're moving in to sweep the other side. And our goal is to destroy all of the turrets, the tank turrets. We took out 2 of them. We're moving to take out the last 2 before we head for the generator that's powering the big gun that is really hitting the Avenger and taking its toll. So we'll watch now as David Jurgen takes a shot and unfortunately does miss the target, but that's okay because he's firing from about it's like 100 feet away with a shotgun. So not a huge surprise in this game that was a miss. But let's talk about David for a moment. Now, what's kind of funny to me at this stage in my life, really, is that when I originally wrote David, he was old. He was 40, and 40 was old. I laugh now because I'm 39, and it doesn't feel as old as it used to. So all these references to David being the old man in the bunch, well, that old man is now me. And maybe I had a little bit of a different idea of how 40 was when I was writing Dawn of Destiny at 19. But I've always found that a little bit funny that I had that strange perception of age. But yeah, so David, you're not as old as you look, buddy. You can still compete with these younger boys. But David, as a character, is just one that you can't help but feel a comfort with. And there he goes, he misses again. Look at this. As I'm talking about him and talking him up, he's going to start missing the target, right? And that's just how it works. But David is a character that, though he is rarely in the spotlight, is still always there, making a difference for his comrades. In particular, he has made a difference with Scott and Esther, having on separate occasions taken both of them under his wing to give them guidance. Because if there's anything we know about both Scott and Esther, it's that they are highly emotional characters in somewhat similar ways, but also in somewhat different ways. I would say that Scott is more aggressively angry, whereas Esther is led more by passion. But they have both found themselves in situations where they have needed that fatherly figure to step in and really just give them wisdom and give them advice. And David has always been that character. I think that David is a surprising fan favorite to a lot of people. I suppose as the writer, I always expect people to naturally gravitate toward the protagonist, who would be Scott, or the funny man, Beacon, or the smug, cocky scout, Esther, or any of these characters that are a little more flashy. But it's always surprised me how many people have come and said, out of all your characters, my favorite one is David. And I love that, because it reminds me that as readers, people aren't always looking for the same thing. And so my wife's favorite character is actually David Jurgen. And I love that. I love that he is a character that people have attached to on a comforting level, if that makes sense. David was also a character who is an homage to a character in the old Merc 32 RPG. One of the characters there that someone played went by the name of David Rommel, Rommel, like the German general. And when I was writing David Jurgen, I kind of wrote with David Rommel in mind, and so in my mind, even though he's a different character with a different personality and life, in my mind, he'll always be a tribute character, so to speak. A little bit of trivia for those who have read David. David's two young sons are named Stevie and Timmy, who are real friends, who are brothers of mine. So that was a little insertion for some of my friends in the real world, just putting them as brothers in this book. And I do sprinkle those things here and there throughout the books. There's no real benefit to going through them all. Just know that if you ever come across a random name, there's a good chance that it's a combination of first and last names of one of my friends or something like that. But as a character, I think that David is so necessary as a centering force in the narrative. And what I mean by a centering force is that when you have these vibrant characters like Beacon here, who's shooting, or like Esther, or like Scott, or even we talked about Svetlana. I don't know that Svetlana would describe herself as vibrant, but when you think of these situations that she has found herself in, they're not all normal situations whatsoever. And even she has had conversations with David. But sometimes you need that person that you can go and talk to, who can return you to an even keel and remind you of what's important and listen to you while giving you advice that keeps you grounded. That's who David is. We could not have this story without him as a sort of calm for the many different vibrant and occasionally combative personalities in the 14th of Novosibirsk. You might think that as a sort of everyman, David might not be one of my favorite characters to write, but believe it or not, I really enjoy writing scenes with David, because it allows me to, for lack of a better way to put it, write someone who's normal and who is going to ask those everyman questions and give those everyman answers and sort of represent the mindset of a normal human being. Truth be told, as vibrant and exciting and fun and funny a character as Beacon is, Beacon's probably my one of my least favorite characters to write, because sometimes it can be hard to pull him out of that funny comic relief mindset without running the risk of him seeming what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe moody or pouty. When Beacon is not high, he's very, very low. And even though he's high, most of the time, when he hits those dips, man, those dips are real. And sometimes that can be a real challenge to write. I don't have that challenge with David. I can write David like any normal person thinks, which is sometimes a really nice thing to be able to do, and a nice mindset to be able to tap into. And so for that reason, he has value to me as the writer, because I can always rely on David to be a voice of reason. A lot like my characters can always rely on him to be a voice of reason. So as you can see, the writer is not all that removed from the characters. I understand why they often go to him for that reassuring word. I do the same thing myself. So you can see here in this mission now that we've started to take our dings, even though we've thrown some mimic beacons, and we still very much have the edge here. That Viper poison spit really did a number on some of our heroes, including Beacon and Scott and Holly. Now they're taking damage from poison every turn and starting to suffer. So this is the stage in the mission where things start to approach a little bit of hairiness, like what's going to happen now, and we're going past the stage where when I hit neck in turn, I'm wondering, am I going to survive this next round? Thank goodness for William Harbinger, who really came through in the latter half, especially, of this operation. Let's talk about William Harbinger while he's doing some fun things on the battlefield. William is one of only 2 characters that were conceived by other people that have made it into Epic as those characters. The other being Logan Marshall. But Logan Marshall and William Harbinger are the only 2 who were not written as homages, but written with permission from the role players, because we were all part of a role-playing group, to be included in this as who they were. And so even though I've taken so many liberties with these characters to where they're really not who they were at all in these old sessions, but it feels good to know that Scott wasn't the only one to come out of those old role-playing sessions to survive them, essentially, and to find new life here in the Epic series. But William Harbinger is I'm trying to think of the nice way to say idiot, but man, he's an idiot. But you love him. He's the biggest knucklehead in the world, and probably not the guy that you would want to give heavy weapons and explosives to. But here we are. It's always fun for me as a Southerner, as a Cajun, but a Southerner, to get to write Southern characters, because there is really such a contrast between North and South in America, so far as especially with dialect, but even how we approach life. It's very casual in the South, and I guess it's that Southern hospitality thing. But sometimes Southern hospitality is just not taking things super seriously, and William epitomizes that as a Southern demolitionist. I love that the phrase battering ram, which is kind of maybe it's the most quotable thing from the series from a fan perspective, but I love that it was William who coined that term. In the audiobook, he was voiced by Jesse Cox. This was back before Jesse really exploded as a YouTuber, but right now he's huge. I think he probably has millions of followers out there on the internet, and he just does a fantastic work with his own YouTube channel. But he brought William to life in the audiobook in a way that I don't know that anyone else could have, because you really have to have that Southern bravado and carefree attitude, but also a little bit of goofiness. And Jesse brought all of that to William and really made him stand out. So the challenge of a character like William is much like the challenge with a character like Beacon, in that when they need to be serious, sometimes it can come across as mopey or just moody, because it's just not who they are most of the time. I mean, William is a guy who, in order to avoid getting it confiscated, takes his smuggled barbecue sauce and literally buries it in the snow like some kind of an animal, so that the Russians can't find it. I mean, this is not someone who is like everyone else, to say the least. But he's still going to have to face major challenges and major obstacles and major losses in this story, because it's a war story. And so with characters who, I don't want to ever say a character is comic relief, because your characters shouldn't be that one-dimensional. You can have characters that have comic relief characteristics, but they still need depth. And with a character like William, he has depth. The hard part is making it show when almost everything that you read is, some, hilarious hijink that he's got going on. So there comes I don't know if the right word is a danger or a risk of danger, when you have these characters and they go through something traumatic, because the right thing to do is to have them be affected and have them, not be the same, at least for a little while. And we definitely can see that with William in book 5, and I can say that without spoiling a whole lot, but he goes through a really rough time in that book. And it becomes hard sometimes to drag them out of it, because you have to remember what makes a character fun in the first place. And that's a different answer for every character. For example, a character like Svetlana, who we talked about earlier, what makes her fun is her journey. That's the part of Svetlana, and seeing how she adapts and seeing what she overcomes. That's the part of her that is fun and entertaining. The part of William that makes him fun and entertaining is not his journey. It's him yelling battering ram before bashing into some no-boats, or burying barbecue sauce in snow, or adding idiotic commentary to things going on around him. That's what makes him fun and memorable. So the payoff of each character is going to be different based on who that character is. For some, it's the journey. For some, it's the witty one-liners. For one, it's the sheer stupidity. And a lot of times with William, it's his sheer stupidity that makes him fun. So all that is to say that you need to treat your different characters differently. It sounds like a common sense thing, but you can get stuck in a mindset of, if I did this with one character, I probably need to give all the other characters their moments like this, and you don't. You don't. Your characters are going to have different story arcs and different motivations, different adventures, and different outcomes. So with a character that is as unique as William is, for the purpose of a laugh, on occasion, make sure you find a way, if you can, to get them back to that. No one wants to see a character deviate so much from what made them enjoyable that they're not enjoyable anymore. And that's always something to be mindful of. A lot of times you'll have stories that are either written or presented on TV where the characters change, and even though it might be realistic for them to change in the negative, it just makes you not like them as much, and it makes it not as fun or worthwhile to watch them go on adventures. So that's just something to be mindful of. That's just kind of a random tidbit. There's only so much I can say about William Harbinger. He is who he is, but he's essential, and he was a chance to really get to have fun with a Southerner, which I'll never pass up when afforded the opportunity. So you can see now in the game that we have moved on to the massive generator that powers that gun. And I just made a little error in the game itself. I had Esther give an extra move to Svetlana, thinking at the time that Svetlana was going to shoot again, and we'd get one step closer to destroying this big generator on this turn. Little did I realize that Svetlana had no ammunition, and so when she got that extra teamwork turn, she had to use it to reload her weapon. I also did not heal the right person right there, not the one I was going for, and so that was a little bit of a frustration on my part as well. So I made a couple of errors, but by and large, this mission was going pretty well by this stage. This mission, in some ways, reminds me of the final battle in Epic 3 Hero. Not because of any of the subject matter in this particular base defense here because the situation was definitely different at the end of book 3, but in the sheer size of it, when I had finished writing Epic 3, or I was coming close to the end, I knew I had a final battle and maybe another chapter or two to wrap up before the book could be finished. And I contacted my editor to see if it was possible to schedule for a future date for her to look at it and grace it with her hands, which Arlene Prunkle was my editor then, and she is just fantastic. Editors are worth their weight in gold. She was outstanding, and she's still a good friend of mine today. But she informed me that I had already scheduled a time to get the book edited, and it was like the Monday after that weekend. So I had literally days to finish this book, and it was just an oversight on my part, not realizing what I had done. But now here I was. I paid to reserve a time for the editing to get done, and she was busy. Her schedule was packed, so it wasn't like she was just knocking me. You know, she had a full plate, and this was the time that was reserved, and there was no way that she would be able to clear her schedule for a different time. And so what ended up happening was I sequestered myself in the upstairs office of my wife and I's apartment. At the time, we lived in an apartment. This was this was the first year of our marriage, and so for basically the whole weekend, I sequestered myself into this bedroom, and I had a 30-some thousand word weekend. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a quality over quantity guy. I don't like to push it. I really don't, unless I'm writing for a contract. Then the situation's a little bit different, but by and large, I don't hold myself to word quotas, daily word quotas. But I consider it a decent day if I've written 1,000 to 1,500 words. That's a good day, you know. And on occasion, as of late, because my time is just so much more limited. And notice this kill here that just happened. I don't want to miss that. But in blowing up that giant generator, I have essentially completed all of the objectives in this operation, and all I had to do now was kill the Chosen, which turned out to be a little more difficult than I had initially thought or hoped. But if you missed it, go back and take a peek at that explosion, because I wiped out, I think it was 4 enemies in that same explosion, 3 sectoids, and I think it was an Archon. All completely died because of that explosion. It was one of the grandest explosions that has ever happened. It's probably the best explosion ever in any XCOM campaign that I've ever played. So it's worth going back and checking out if you missed it. But back to the other point, I consider it pretty decent if I write 1,000 or 1,500 words in a given day. Lately, I have pushed it to, man, every now and then I'll pump out 5,000, but I'm spending hours a day doing this and just committing myself to getting it done. And that's so I can compensate for the days that I don't have to write, which is like, man, 90% of my days. It's just not an option. So a 30-some thousand word weekend comes out to 10,000 plus words a day over the course of 3 days. It was insane. I was in this office for an entire weekend. I was terrified. I didn't know how this would turn out, because I would usually write a mission and it's going to basically happen kind of in this way, and there might be a surprise or two along the way, but by and large, we're going here. And I really wasn't 100% sure how this mission would go, and it was the climactic mission of this novel, which at the time was the biggest novel in the series. And all of a sudden I found out that I had 3 days to wrap this book so I can get it to my editor. All that to say, it turned out fantastic. For a while it felt like it wouldn't end, but it turned out so well. It ended up being, I think, one of the more epic, no pun intended, missions in the series, and a great conclusion to the book with a lot of fun action, some drama mixed along the ways, and some intrigue, all the stuff that you want. And if that speaks to any point, maybe it does speak to being willing to lose a little bit of control. Now, I mentioned earlier I like to maintain about 80% control. I probably had lost about 80% of control at that stage in the writing process, because I just had to get it done, and I didn't have a choice. But I relied on characters like Esther and Scott, who were just led by a passion to help me out, guys. You tell me what you want to do, and I'm just going to write it. And in a lot of amazing ways, they really came through for me, and it ended up being such a pivotal battle in the series. So if nothing else, it's a fun and interesting story today. So when you read the final climactic battle and the closing chapters of Epic 3 Hero, just remember that I wrote that in one weekend. I felt like I was going to die. I'm going to be completely honest. I was so, I lived to write that whole weekend. I just ate tidbits and then went back into my office and wrote. I don't know if I saw my wife for 2 hours that whole weekend. I slept in the same bed, and that's about it. But I had to get it done. She knew I needed to get it done, and the good news is it got done, and it turned out fantastic. One thing I would definitely say to any writer looking to really do this is not to set yourself or compare yourself, is maybe a better way to put it, to the work habits of other writers. And I say that with a caveat, and I've kind of touched on this in earlier episodes, but the caveat is you can learn fantastic things from seeing how other writers work. I have been blessed enough to work with some awesome writers, real legends like Mike Stackpole and Bob Vardaman, Aaron Rosenberg. I mean, I've really had an awesome array of mentors, not the least of which was Barbara Colley, who was my original mentor. And so from all of them, I've learned a lot. But there are kids online, and a kid is anything from 30 and under pretty much at this stage of my life, but who have nothing to do except write all day. They don't have the obligations that a lot of adults have, that I have. So know your life limitations. I guess that's a way to put it. For example, I know that I don't have time to sit and write every day, but the downside, or rather the upside to not having the time to sit around and just write to my heart's content every day, is that time is spent with my wife and my sons, and that's just irreplaceable time. I would never want to replace that with writing time. Now, I write when I can, and they know that I try to take advantage of opportunities to write as often as I can, but writing never takes precedence over them, and that's important for them to know. And it's important that you know that you have to look at your own life before you start comparing yourself to others as a writer. For many years, I compared myself to some other indie writers who were out there, and I always felt like I'm just not good enough. This was many years ago, really toward the first few years of my writing career, And one day it hit me that these writers, they were my age, but they had no spouses, they had no kids. That's all they had was Microsoft Word, and it actually kind of made me feel sad, because that was the penalty for having all the time in the world to write, is that they didn't have all of those other things that I was blessed to have. So that's another little tidbit out there for you. So we can see now in this mission that things are not going well. First off, look at this. This looks like the California wildfires here. Everything is burning. My soldiers are burning. I'm shaking my head here in this this image because it's just not going well at this stage. And I have a mind-controlled soldier, I have a stunned soldier, a dazed soldier, and it's not looking good. So by this stage, I was getting nervous because the mission was not done until I killed the Chosen. You can see Beacon is still on fire and down to 2 pegs of health, so he's almost a goner right there. Lord knows he has survived enough brushes with death in this series, but I was a little bit scared because I hadn't lost anyone on this mission. In fact, very few people had been really injured in this operation. But here I felt like I was on the verge of losing it all. You see, David pulled off an amazing move there in striking that priest and stunning him at the same time, which freed Svetlana from mind control. Now, that singular action, I think, saved this mission, because if I didn't have the extra moves and the extra soldier, and if I had an alien-controlled soldier, at this time, I could not have dealt with it. And you can even see here with Drake, he's got 1 peg of health. So we have a lot of soldiers on the verge of death, and it was just making a hairy situation overall. And the miss there didn't help either. You never know in not only a game like this, obviously, but in writing a manuscript, which characters are going to come through for you at any given time. So here you can see, obviously, William Harbinger really came through, and I'm pumped up there in the video because that was a kill that I needed, and the purifier did not explode, which I was convinced like he's going to blow up and do more damage. But William came through in the clutch, and it's awesome when you're writing a battle, or it doesn't have to be a battle; it can be an intense moment. But when a character comes through in the clutch right when you needed them the most, it's extremely satisfying, especially when that character is not necessarily one of your main characters or your one protagonist. The reader kind of expects your protagonist to come through at the end, but it's nice when another warrior can be the one to save the day. And I think of Auric Broll, who is not, I don't think I have him on my squad here, or if I did, maybe he died in an earlier mission. I'm not entirely sure, but I know he's not on my team now here. But Auric Broll is a character who, man, he has had his moments. For being a character who exists primarily in the background, he has really come through in some key moments to not only help his comrades in battle, but to really push forward the entire plot of the series. And so it's nice, and you look for those moments so that your, I don't want to say necessarily lesser known soldiers, but your non-protagonist soldiers or characters rather, can have their times to shine. One thing that you should always keep in mind too is that fans are all going to like different characters. So there'll be fans who may gravitate toward one type of character and shy away from another type of character that other fans gravitate toward. What you don't want to do is leave these characters behind completely. So with as many characters as this series has, and my goodness, it has so many named characters, it's impossible to have all of them have a moment in every single book. And so what ends up happening for me is that there are some books where certain characters kind of step away from the limelight, and maybe they're not as prominently featured in a story. Well, it becomes my responsibility as the writer to make sure that these characters don't just get forgotten overall, that they do indeed have their moments, because there are fans who are waiting with bated breath specifically for these characters. I think of Yuri Dostoevsky right now, who did not have a massive role in the prior book, and so he's a major character in the series, but sometimes it's impossible to get everyone in there, to get everyone invested in the main plot of every single book. But there will be books, and there will be eminent books where Yuri is featured prominently. Likewise, I talk a lot about Beacon and Esther. These are two characters that dominate the spotlight when they're on scene, yet even they have their low-key books or moments or stretches in the series where, they've kind of taken a back seat, sometimes by necessity, to allow some other characters to get their moment. But in the end, you want your fans to feel like their efforts and their loyalty have not been wasted. So don't leave characters behind. If you name a character, if they're part of the action, they can't just disappear. So that's always something to keep in mind. Every character that has a purpose, every character that has a name, needs to have some sort of role in the series, even if it occasionally is less important than at other times. I hope that makes sense. It makes a little more sense. It makes a lot of sense in my head, so hopefully I'm conveying it in the right way. But it's giving you permission to occasionally bump some characters down on the list, but also making sure that you elevate some others and then give them all their fair due in the end, so that no one feels like you just completely forgot about a character. At this stage in this operation, I was not feeling good. So you can see we've had a ton of soldiers and mech troopers and stun lancers that we've had to muscle through. We've got mind-controlled soldiers, not the least of which to worry about is the Chosen, who we have not even touched at this point. So he's been just a wrecking ball. There you go. Beacon is dazed, and he's a major player. And here's David on the verge of causing all kinds of trouble. I'll mention this now because it's a moment that happens at the beginning of this next turn, and I actually had to kind of pause and think about it for a while. I actually considered killing David. I never target mind-controlled characters because obviously you can get them back. You almost always get them back, right? But I had so many soldiers who were damaged or in bad position that I really thought David's going to start killing people off. And there's not a lot I'm going to be able to do without killing him. And I think this might be that moment right here where I'm just thinking, God, what am I going to do? Am I actually going to have to kill David Jurgen in order to save the other soldiers? Now, granted, this is a final. Here I am throwing my head back in disgust because my sniper had a 3% chance. 3. That's 1, 2, 3 of hitting. But this was a do or die mission. This was an all or nothing operation. Either I beat this guy or the game is over. And if the game is over, it's over. But I hate to kill. I would have hated to kill David. In the end, I decided not to attack him. So we'll see shortly how that all turned out. See, I was moving Esther up to take a slash, and I was a little disappointed at this stage that it wasn't a more powerful hit than that, but it was what it was. I've always liked to have Scott and Esther fighting side by side. In the series, they really, regardless of their relationship, and it's a very dynamic, frequently changing relationship, but they match up well as a fighting team. And it's always nice to have these teams that just work well together. And so in Epic, I put them together. In here, I put them together a time or two because they complement each other very well for being characters who are not connected by a bond link. So we've completed every objective at this point, and it's all about the Chosen. I was feeling terrible. I was not too pleased at this stage. I don't mind sharing that I hate the Warlock Chosen. He's just annoying. I just don't like him. He's my least favorite, even though I find the Assassin more difficult. I just don't like the Warlock for whatever reason. Yuri Dostoevsky is a character who, in this mission, even though he's been present, hasn't had a lot to do. But in Epic, he is such a profound character to me. And I always say I don't write Christian material for Epic, but I do write from a Christian perspective. And a lot of people would probably point to Scott Remington and say, well, there's the Christian-like protagonist of Epic. I would not point necessarily to Scott as the best example of Christian allegory. Now, I don't want to say a whole heck of a lot because I know there are people who may not have read that far, but I definitely think Yuri Dostoevsky stands alone as a character that represents what Christianity is about. I guess that's his nickname in this game is Saint. And before that, it was Apostle before I changed it to Saint. So you have to know that this character has, a religious side to him. But he has one of my favorite moments in the entire series in Book 3. If you're a fan, you know the moment. You can probably guess why it's one of my favorite moments. But it was one that I felt coming. And so that was another instance. And here we go with 2 mind-controlled soldiers. And I was like, I'm done. I'm over. This game is over. And no, look at this. 6 damage. And lost mind control on Svetlana, so she was, lost mind control on David, so he was fine. Svetlana was not doing too hot, but no one had died, and so I found that thrilling. But book 3 was another instance where a character, this time Dostoevsky, really started to maybe not defy the will of the writer, but really prompt me what to do. And I say Dostoevsky prompted me what to do, but as a Christian and a man of faith myself, I always point to God and to the Holy Spirit for all prompting that occurs. But I believe that Dostoevsky was an instrument, and so it was just interesting to see how even during the course of that book, he evolved so incredibly much. I think you sensed it coming early on, but the way it all unfolded is one of the more rewarding things that I've ever written, and rewarding story arcs in a single book that I've ever written. I'm proud of it. I love it. Every now and then, I just crack it open and read it just to enjoy it. Interesting little tidbit. I don't particularly enjoy reading what I write. So I read when I must, but by and large, when I finish a book, I don't want to go back and read a whole lot unless I am checking to make sure that I haven't missed something or gotten something wrong. But there are a few scenes that I just enjoy reading, and Dostoevsky's is one of them. Maybe there are a few more. I do like a lot of Svetlana's scenes in book 5, and I can sense that I'll enjoy some in book 6 too. I do like those cinematic moments. But yeah, for the most part, when a book is done, I'm done with it. I'm ready to move on. So I guess in that way I can relate to actors who don't watch the movies that they star in. So here you can see we've got the Chosen surrounded. We still have a mind control Sveta over there. The situation is improving, but I'm not out of the woods at this stage. And I have this entire grouping of soldiers over there by the Chosen, all of whom are severely injured, all of whom are on the verge of death. One more shot, basically, and that'll be all for them. So all of these guys, I just had running away from Svetlana. I was convinced that she's going to kill them in this next turn. But fortunately, I was mistaken. This was one of the few times that I was thrilled to see enemies spawn right on top of me, because it meant that I wasn't going to have an attack on one of my soldiers that could kill them. I knew these two Phantom Warriors, I forget what they're exactly called, but I knew they weren't going to attack on the first round, so I'd have time to go after them. The downside was that I could not attack the Chosen Warlock while these two were alive, because he was in stasis. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but it was only a matter of time until that was remedied. Going in for the slash here, I find that in this mission, David really didn't connect with kill shots on a lot of his sword attacks. I'm not exactly sure why, because I don't think he is. I think he's as advanced as any other ranger. But this was definitely a time when I needed a bunch of kill shots and just was not getting them for whatever reason. But in the end, these two did fall, which was good. I haven't pointed this out, but I do like Drake's outfit. That was one of the custom outfits that I unlocked by beating the Legacy DLC, and it just is a slick look for him. It really is unique to him, and I really like the way that it turned out. So now that these two were dead, the Warlock was released from his stasis, and I just about went nuts when I realized that I could actually do something. And it all fell on Svetlana to come through, which she did. Execution shot, one-hit kill, and the Chosen was defeated. An amazing turn of events, a mission I felt I had no business winning, let alone escaping with all of my soldiers alive. And you can see right there in the center of the screen the 3 sectoids in the Archon that exploded and died whenever the generator blew up. But yeah, I was happy to win this, let alone escape with all of my soldiers intact. Didn't expect it, but I took it. Sometimes you take what the game gives you. And in this instance, it all worked out well. I took a nice poster. I don't take time to really position these guys in the posters. I'll take a quick shot when it's something of significance. And that was the Great Base Defense in XCOM 2, War of the Chosen. So far, now the Hunter's coming after us too, so I don't know what's going to happen. I do have to recap a little bit here. Look at the number of wounded soldiers that I ended up with after this mission. And I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed that more soldiers weren't promoted by this stage. I really thought there'd be a lot more promotions going around, but I didn't find there were as many. Maybe half, or maybe not even half, of the soldiers got promotion, and that was a lot of villains to kill. So went straight scout with Esther. I don't know which other way I could go with Esther. She is who she is, so we're going to stick with scout for her. And with William, same thing. I just went straight demolitions expert on the left because he's a demolitionist in Epic. So I'm going to just go straight down that column all the while with him. As you can see, we got a slew of loot here, all of which is extremely helpful. All these corpses are a massive benefit to the game because they allow you to build things and build devices. And so it was really, really good to be able to actually collect all of these different corpses, which are going to come in handy in the future. We got a couple of autopsies. It was telling me what I already knew, that we were on the verge of death as an organization, but hey, we're still clicking away. Now look at all the negative traits that my soldiers have acquired. Fear of poison, fear of missed shots, fear of psionics. There was just so much after that operation. And look how many gravely wounded soldiers. I did have a promotion for Dostoevsky, and I chose run and gun. He'll kind of be a mix of the scout and assault columns, but that just seems to fit him. And he was it. So fear of mechs and fear of psionics. That's 2 for Yuri. I actually did not know that a soldier could get more than 1 negative trait until this mission, and so that was a little bit of a bummer to see. But it's still not looking too good. Even though we had a successful mission and never lost anyone, it's still not looking too great for our soldiers, for the sake of the Earth. And as I scroll down here, the only soldiers available at this stage are Max and Varvara. So if you can imagine those two in Epic, having to save the day, that's kind of where we were at this point in the story. But it ended up being a successful mission, an amazing base defense against every odd. It worked, and the Avenger is still flying. I didn't have enough. I didn't have any soldier of high enough rank to get any of the promotions. The thing I'm waiting for is the sixth soldier, which I would need a captain for. So I need a couple more soldiers or at lieutenant, so one more promotion and they'll be there. I could not build anything, and I just decided to go straight on to the geoscape and rock this out. So you'll just see a little bit of this before I went on to the next operation. The training center is going to be the next thing that I build, but it's taken so long for the debris removal to take place for some of these hollowed out, non-hollowed out sections of the Avenger. So that was a little bit of a frustration, especially I've had so many missions take place over such a short period of time that it feels like I haven't had the time to get anything done in the geoscape. It's really just been one thing after another, and so that's been frustrating. You can see this sectoid on the operating table here as I do the sectoid research. The Athene in Epic, I would say based off of sectoids, because sectoids are based off of the gray aliens that have always existed in the UFO circuit here in the real world. And so that's really what the Athene from Epic are based around as well. So these were all autopsies that I just was able to complete instantly, and so I just wanted to knock them out. They all help with the technology that I get from them. For example, with the sectoid, I got a mind shield, which is so incredibly important, and this allowed me to really improve my grenades, which is something that I have not done yet. I'm still waiting on some supply. I really need a supply drop to come through, but that's going to be a big deal too, especially for my demolitionist. And of course, the Viper King, who was executed. I'm having a good string of luck with these execution shots, but that was Esther who took out the Viper King in one shot. So we have Esther and Svetlana both eliminating a major threat with one bullet, which is such a great thing. And it's always lucky. Always feel lucky when it happens. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, I suppose. So even though I was able to build a mind shield here, I opted not to, because if I need one, I can always go and build one. But I wanted to hold on to some of those supplies just because my supplies were so low. I say so low, but relative to the things that I wanted to get done. Very pushed for supply at this stage. And here we go. I really looked at this, and even though there were 3 missions to choose from, I knew that first mission would be the one that I want to go with because it was nothing but Lost. And I always feel like I could do well against Lost. And the reward for that mission was an engineer. So, my goodness, if there's anything we need right now, it's an engineer. So it was a no-brainer for me that I go on this operation to get that engineer and to fight nothing but lost enemies. I feel like this campaign has gone fairly well thus far. I made some errors toward the beginning, and I really didn't take advantage of a lot of opportunities, so I had some missed opportunities because of that. But by and large, I think we've done okay. I feel like we are at a corner, and we just need to turn it. So I was thinking of not putting Max and Varvara on this mission because I was going to bring them both up as specialists so they could be who they are in Epic, but I had no choice. And so this is not the best crew to go into a Lost mission with. with a sniper. A sniper is kind of terrible for a lost mission. And a Templar is not ideal either, simply because you're not going to have as many headshot opportunities. You're not going to get so many kills with just the pistol. And so that wasn't something I was too wild about. Mark Harris is ready to go for this operation. He has the same personality as William Harbinger, apparently. So for what it's worth, maybe they're blood brothers. You can see the smug wink right there from Varvara. Varvara is another character that I'm excited to talk about at some point. She's a character that I actually really enjoy writing, even though she doesn't have as prominent a role as many of the other characters in the Epic series. But all of these characters are beloved to me, even the least of these, which is where I think many people would classify Varvara. But she's a full human being with a story arc and with a personality, and with something to offer. Now, those who know Varvara, that will have that statement. She has something to offer. Will have an interesting meaning considering her impact on the story thus far. But we will get into that at some point in the near future. This was where this operation of mine came to an end. This marathon 2-hour gameplay event. I never had any idea while I was recording this that the audio was not working properly. And if you would hear the video with the audio that came with it, it was terrible. So you're missing nothing. But hopefully we can get this issue sorted out so that we can continue as we have prior to this. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this a little bit unique and different video. If so, please like and subscribe. That's what I'm saying there on the screen right now. Look me up at www.epicuniverse.com or look up Dawn of Destiny by Lee Stephen. That's Stephen with a PH on Amazon. You can also find me on Twitter at Epic Universe. EPICUNIVERSE. That's a wrap for this different style of episode, and one that I hope I don't have to repeat, just because I'd much prefer giving you the action as it's occurring. But we do what we have to do, and we make it work. All right, guys, y'all take care, and I'll see y'all next time.